And before I move to the next story, I want you to listen to a soundbite. I want you to listen to what the United States had told India just a few days back.
When it comes to oil purchases, sanctions, etc., I just note that there are carve-outs for energy purchases. Of course, we're encouraging countries not to purchase additional energy supplies from Russia. Every country is differently situated, has different needs, requirements, but we're looking to allies and partners not to increase their purchases of Russian energy.
The President both conveyed that we are here to help them diversify their means of importing oil. Again, the imports from the United States are already significant, or much bigger than the imports that they get from Russia. And we, of course, the President conveyed very clearly that it is not in their interest to increase that.
Washington says it is in India's interest to not increase imports of Russian oil. Why? Because the West has banned Russian oil. The US, the UK, Canada have all banned imports of oil from Russia. It is their way of showing solidarity with Ukraine, showing the world that the West is sacrificing its own interests to stand with Ukraine. Or so it wants you to think. Russia is the world's largest oil exporter. On a usual day, the country exports 7.8 million barrels of oil. In 2021, crude oil and petroleum product exports made 37% of Russian export revenue. The West claims to be closing this tap. Countries have been told to not buy Russian oil. India has been lectured to not increase imports of Russian oil. But guess what? The West itself has not stopped buying oil from Russia. Russian oil is being secretly shipped to the West. This is the story of a Murky operation. If you head to any Russian port today, you would find oil tankers marked destination unknown. In other words, no one knows where these oil tankers are going. Once they set sail, these tankers turn off their tracking systems, so there is no way to figure out their route or their destination. Reports say that Russian oil tankers have been disappearing from the tracking system. One investigation found that during the week of March 12th, there were 33 such incidents of Russian tankers disappearing from the radar. Why? Because these tankers were secretly delivering oil. Were these tankers headed to Europe? The continent is the biggest buyer of Russian oil. It imports 3.8 million barrels of Russian oil every day. Europe pays Russia $850 million every day for energy, $450 million for oil, $400 million for gas. These are pre-war numbers. When Russia invaded Ukraine, Europe came together to condemn the Kremlin. European leaders said they will reverse energy dependence on Russia. Listen in to the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz.
We are actively working to get independent from the import of oil, and we think that we will be able to make it during this year.
Earlier this month, over 11 million barrels of oil were loaded into tankers tagged destination unknown. This murky trend corresponds with an increase of Russian oil exports to Europe. When the war broke out, Russian oil imports to Europe fell to 1.3 million barrels. It now stands at 1.6 million barrels a day. The increase is hardly surprising. You see, Europe needs Russian oil. Without it, European trucks and farm equipment will come to a standstill. 32% of the EU's energy comes from oil, and 27% of the bloc's oil comes from Russia. Can Europe not import from West Asia or the United States instead? On paper, yes. In practice, not yet. Europe's oil infrastructure is designed for oil flow from east to west, not the other way around. And there is another problem. Certain European refineries are designed to use Russian oil. If you pour crude from Saudi Arabia or America into them, these refineries will become less efficient. In other words, Europe cannot afford to boycott Russian oil. It also cannot afford to openly buy Russian oil because then it would be seen as funding the Russian war machinery. Even worse, betraying its NATO allies who have embargoed Russian oil. And this is where the destination unknown tag comes into play. These Russian tankers are ferrying oil to larger ships at sea. There, the Russian oil is mixed with other cargo. That way, Russian oil continues to flow into Western countries without the world taking notice. Reports say that Russian oil is being clandestinely loaded into ships heading to the Netherlands. In some markets, Russian oil has found new aliases. It is being called the Latvian blend or the Turkmenistani blend. Reports say barrels bound for Romania, Estonia, Greece and Bulgaria more than doubled in April. Shipments were also up for the Netherlands and Finland. Such is the West's desperation for Russian oil that it is being rebranded, secretly loaded with other cargo. Tankers are turning off transponders. They are breaking international law just so that the West can continue to fuel its development with Russian oil. And yet, somehow, the West thinks it has the locus standi to lecture India on its imports. Heights of hypocrisy, we say. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.